it's my pleasure to introduce Brenda. Brenda Smith is from Sioux Falls and has been involved in the disability field for many years. I think since I got into the disability field, Brenda's been working hard to assist families and people with disabilities in getting a good life. She's a certified person-centered thinking mentor, trainer through the International Learning Community on Person-Centered Practices. She is also a life course ambassador. Brenda provides training and consultation to families, educators, organizations, and agencies. Brenda's passion is to help individuals, families, and professionals envision and plan a good life for those they work with, teach, support, and care about. Please welcome Brenda. And Brenda, the floor is yours. Thank you for helping us out.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be here to talk about person-centered thinking and person-centered approaches. As Dan said, I live in Sioux Falls, and let's see, there we go. I'm from Sioux Falls and have worked in the field, as he said, for a very long time. My educational background is elementary and special education. And on the screen, you'll see that I am also a member of a family. And I have two sons, and our youngest son, who just turned 35 years old a couple of weeks ago, experiences disability. And so he requires support in his life. So a lot of the things that I talk about, a lot of the things that, the tools that I'll be offering today, we use to plan and problem solve in his life. And because my efforts, I guess, from the time he was little, was to have a good life, whether it was a good life at school or a good life as an adult. And we've worked very hard to help that happen. So that's just a little bit about me. About the session today, we've done some things virtually, which should work okay if all my technology goes according to plan. I do like, if you choose to have your video camera on, it's okay to be able to see some faces out there versus a black screen. If you do have a question and want to say something, try and get someone's attention or put it in the chat box. And if Dan or Jennifer would kind of help monitor that, that would be helpful to me. Jennifer did post a couple of handouts up on the website that go along with today's session. And so you should have received, or you should have access to the PowerPoint that I'll be using today. It is in slide notes or format. So there'd be 3 slides to a page with opportunity to write on the side. I also added some full-size documents, just because I think on some of those slide pages, it's hard to read if it's very small. And I wanted to use a couple of things for some exercises today. So you should have access to that. If you don't, because you didn't have them printed on, that's okay. If you have a piece of paper and a pen, we can figure that out as well. So please feel free to ask questions as we go along. So in this session today, what I want you to kind of leave here with are strategies using what we call person-centered thinking skills to get to know who that student or person is. And then I hope we have some time to practice, and I plan that, to practice skills that inform discovery that can help guide you in transition planning. So when we talk about discovery, oops, let's go back. So when we talk about discovery, I looked it up in the dictionary. And discovery, the definition of discovery is to gain insight or knowledge of something previously unseen or unknown, to notice, to realize, to make known, reveal, or disclose. And that's what I think about when we do transition planning or any sort of planning for a person's future. It's about discovering, who is that person? How do we get to know them in a way that's very meaningful? How do we learn the best of what they have to offer, and how can we identify their contributions? Transition is that point in time that, from a parent standpoint, is filled with change, with growth, with excitements, but also from fear and some confusion. And that's sometimes how families or students might think about transition. But it is defined as movement, passage, or change from one position or one stage to another. So it is a time where families start to think about, what's life going to be like for my family member when school is finished? And how do we make the most of that time of transition planning so that they really have a good foundation to launch into their adult life? So when I talk about person-centered thinking, person-centered thinking skills or tools, it refers to a set of tools or skills, because they need practice, that gather information to see the whole person, to see the student as holistically, and convey that core belief that all people, all students have gifts to share. Person-centered thinking helps us support people rather than try to fix people. It provides a common language, easily communicated using everyday language and not necessarily jargon. It's a set of skills that result in teams keeping the focus on the student, not necessarily the focus on what's available or what we have to offer at this time, but the focus is on the student. And it's a way to discover, describe, and assure the desired life, including of the student, not necessarily the life desired or expected by others in their life. So you have a variety of ways, and I was listening to the presenter this morning, talking about in the beginning, talking about assessments and ways of gathering information about people. Using person-centered approaches offers additional ways of getting to know the person. You know, we often think about people, especially people with significant disabilities, and we often think about those folks as those that have a significant cognitive or physical impairment. But I like us to think a little bit broader, that all students have some complex lives at one time or another. And that life itself, and especially during COVID, brings some complexities, and that it's important to discover or get to know a person or a student. And while you may know them from having them in class, having them over a couple of years or so on, I think you'll find that person-centered planning can really help you gather different information, get to know that student in a different way, and get a whole picture of who that student is. So when I talk about those skills and tools, what I'm referring to are these. It starts with the core concept of learning what is important to and what is important for a student, and finding some balance in between. And I'm going to explain that a little more in just a few moments. We have what we call discovery and listening tools, and that includes a relationship map, communication chart, looking at reputations, a drill. What are rituals and routines that the student has, and how do we use that information to learn about what's important to, and then looking at a good day and a bad day for the person. Those are discovery and listening tools. Person-centered thinking also has what we call everyday learning skills. How do we evaluate? How do we look at some of the things that are happening in that person's life or in that person's day? So you'll see that there are 3 skills here. This particular presentation won't include information on the everyday learning skills. I just wanted everyone to see what's involved. And then there are what we call the management tools. We refer to one as a donut, where we look at the roles and responsibilities of people involved in the person's life. And then we have a matching tool, which says, you know, in order to get a good quality of life, sometimes we need a good match between the person and those that are supporting them, a good match between them and a job. A good match makes a difference in the quality of life. So that's what we mean. And the puzzle pieces are there just to represent that these skills and tools can be used alone, and they can also be used together. And the whole point of all of them is to learn about who that student is, what's important to, and what's important for them. So that is the fundamental skill of person-centered thinking, and I'm going to describe just a little bit, and ask you to do a little exercise. So in your packets or on your notes, you should have a sheet that looks like this. If you weren't able to print them off, just use a piece of paper, make a chart with a line down the middle, and on one side, list important to me, and the other side, list important for me. And what I'd like you to do is just think about yourselves right now. And I want you to write about 3 things under the important to me that you would include as you think about yourself, 3 things that are important to you. And on the other side, and I'm not going to ask you to do the important for me, I'll explain that a little bit later. Just focus on the important to. So take a minute to write down at least 3 things that are important to you. Important to you in your work, important to you in your life, whichever, or a combination of both. Okay, we've got 3 things. I'm going to ask somebody and if they'd be willing to share 3 of those things. Now, I can't see everybody that's listed on the screen, but I can see a few people. And if somebody would just be willing to share their 3 things that are important to them. Get our attention. Okay, we've got, let's see. Do you want to unmute? Is it Lynette or Jeanette?
All right, I'm unmuted now. Annette.
Okay.
So family is important to me.
Okay. A couple other things. Anybody else? Okay, Trisha, do you want to unmute Trisha?
I said my faith and my friends.
Okay, so family, faith, and friends. And we've got a large size group here. So it is hard to get everybody's participation. But my guess is that a majority of you would have things like friends, would have things like family, and would have things like faith as well. Those are pretty typical in most of the examples or the important twos that I share, or that I have an opportunity to read. So when we think about important to me, we may write those generalities, the friends, the family, the faith, but I think about what makes one person's different than another, and how do we know that? And sometimes it's listening for and including some of that detail. So when I look at what's important to, and this is what we consider the definition of important to, it includes those things that help us feel satisfied, content, comforted, fulfilled, and happy. So when we talk about important to in the person-centered thinking world, we're talking about the people to be with in the relationships in our lives. We're talking about the status and control that we have in our own life. The things that we like to do, the places that we like to go, the rituals and the routines that we all have them, that we have in our lives that are important to us because they provide things for us. The rhythm and pace somebody likes to have in their life, the things that they like to have, and it also includes those things that give us purpose and meaning. That's all included under important too. So when you look at that definition I'd like you to go back to where you wrote your 3 things. And I want you to think, based on this definition, what else might you add to your list of important to? And as you're looking at your list, I'd also like you to look at, if I wrote friends, provide a little bit more of information about, maybe I like to have coffee with a friend every single week. Maybe it's I like to talk to my family members once a week or once a month. Or maybe it's we like to go camping as a family. Something that gives the reader a little bit of information about what makes you you, what makes you unique. So I'm going to stop the share, and I'm going back to the group, and I'm going to go back and I'm going to ask, was it Annette that you volunteered? Okay, so when you went back, was there anything that you added to your list based on that definition or would add? Oh, we've got to unmute her.
There we go.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. I was helping my SPED teacher get onto her session. Her computer wasn't working, so I'm sorry.
Sorry, I called you out on that.
No, that's okay. I was helping her get into her session, so sorry, I didn't hear.
Let me ask somebody else if they would volunteer. From their first list to their second list, was there any information based on the definition or any detail that you added? And as you know, I'm not afraid to volunteer people, so. Okay, is it Zalea? Okay, can you unmute?
Yes. So I wrote family, but then I wanted to clarify and just get more in depth. It was cooking with my daughter is very important to me.
Okay. It kind of gives us a little bit more sense of who you are and what you value. Would anybody else be willing to add anything? Give us an example.
Yeah, I have to have a routine to get out of the house to get where I need to go every day. If I don't have that, I don't function.
Okay. So instead of just writing routines down, it's really important to add enough detail so that somebody else knows what you mean by what you write. And those are a couple of things, is that information in detail. So the fundamental skill, and I'm going to try and go back here. Let's see. Mara, you raised your hand.
Yeah, that was my comment, that I have to have a routine out of the house every day. Otherwise, I feel behind all day long when I get to school as a teacher. So,
okay, very important to you to feel like you're on top of things for the day, right? Okay, and somebody else, Whitley, said, instead of just my dog, I added our nightly walks with our dog. Okay, so that gives me a little bit more information and a little more clues to who you are as well. So I'm going to go back to sharing the screen and hope that I don't, okay. So those are the things that we mean by important to. Now, if we go on to the next, and we already did that, important to includes those things that matters most to the person. And when you think about it, it's really their own definition of quality of life. It's the things that must be present, that I want to have, that I value, that make me happy, that give me satisfaction or give me purpose. And in essence, we're defining the quality of our own lives. So what is important to a person includes only what people say with their words or with their behavior or actions. So how many of you, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, that you know people, sometimes it happens with my husband, who's a very nice man, but sometimes he says one thing and he does another. And so what am I going to pay attention to? What he says or what he does? And most often, we pay attention to what a person does. And so we always say, listen to what a person is telling you. And if their words say one thing and their behavior says another, we have to ask the question why, and we have to dig a little bit deeper. I think about my son, and I think about friends that he has or students that I've known over time. And I think sometimes they've gotten really good at telling us what we want to hear. For my son's case, he's gotten very good at it because he wants to please us. He wanted to please people in his life, whether it's at school or whether it's at work. And so he might tell you something, but you would have to watch his behavior to see if it's really important to him or not. Hopefully everybody's had, I'm sure you've all had that experience, and hopefully that makes sense. But instead of getting frustrated with it, I always tell people, think about why. Dig a little bit deeper, and maybe these person-centered tools can help you do that. Then when we talk about what's important for a person, it's really talking about prevention of illness. It's about those issues of health. What needs to be addressed to prevent illness for this person? Maybe the student has a health condition. What needs to be addressed so that they can either treat it or manage it? How do we help, and what needs to be addressed for the person so that we promote wellness? For example, diet and exercise. Important for a person also includes the issues of health and safety. And we have to think what needs to be addressed for the person to be safe, not just physically, but also in some cases emotionally as well. And what needs to be addressed so the person is free from fear. Important for also includes one other aspect, and that's what do others see as necessary to help the person be valued and be a contributing member of their community. And let me give you an example about this. And I think about a student that I had helped the family do some planning, person-centered planning. And the student was really interested in being a part of a club after school. And it was an FFA club. And so we talked about in that planning meeting, we want him to be a comfortable, confident, contributing member of that club, not to just be present. And so we had some discussion about, does he need any coaching? Does he need any heads up? Are there any additional materials he needs so that he feels like he is ready to participate and able to contribute? And so sometimes that takes intention, and it takes some coaching so that that person can be more than just present, that they can be an active and participating member. Another example of that valued community, and I use this quite a bit, my son likes to go for coffee. He doesn't really like coffee. He orders something else, but he always says, why don't we go for coffee? And so if we're going to a new place, I like to give him a heads up as far as what's on the menu and the process of how you order the coffee. Do you go up to the counter? Do you wait for someone to wait on you? You got to make sure that you know where the line is, because sometimes it's really hard to know where the line is. But there's a little bit of coaching, because I want people, and we go to places regularly, or we did, now we drive through. But when we are able to go to places, each place has a little bit of its own culture. And I want him to be able to feel comfortable, and others see him, not as somebody who'd go to the wrong end of the line and cut in front of everybody, but would know where to go and how to manage that. So just a couple of examples how we want students and people to be contributing members, and sometimes that's the important for. Okay, so important to and for are connected. They influence each other. None of us do anything that is important for us unless there's a piece of it that's important to them. So if I use an example of, say, boy, it's important to me that I be able to fit into my clothes from one season to the next. And it's important to me to like to go out to eat quite a bit. But on the other hand, it's important for me to manage blood pressure, manage other things. So I'm not going to pay attention to what's important for me, the eating healthier, the eliminating certain things, unless there's a piece of what's important to me as well. It's trying to find some of that balance. And it's trying to say, we want to do things that are important for us, but there has to be a little piece of what's important too, or there has to be something connected to what's important to us. Because I know people that might say, I need to go on a diet, but I'm not going to do it if it doesn't include any chocolate because I can't maintain it. Or my behavior, certain things that I do that people want me to stop, maybe won't be successful unless there's something that's important to me as part of the picture. And it's all about finding some of that balance. And balance is dynamic, it's changing, it always involves trade-off between the things that are important to us and the things that are important for us. And if you think about your own lives, if you think about your health and safety and being a valued member of different groups or clubs or organizations, and you think about what's important to you, you're constantly trying to find some balance in your own life. And with our sons and daughters or your students, oftentimes we're trying to help somebody else find balance, and it gets a little bit more challenging. Are there any questions about that balance piece of important to us and important for us? And if there are, would you put it in the chat box and then let me know. It is the fundamental skill of person-centered thinking. And so all the information that we're trying to gather is an effort to learn those things about the person. So I talked about some of the discovery skills, and Jennifer and Dan, if you happen to see any questions, please let me know, okay, if I missed them. So I talked about those discovery and listening skills just a little bit earlier with the slide of the puzzle pieces. These are what we refer to as those discovery skills. And I highlighted the top two because that's the two that I'm going to be able to focus on today. There are other opportunities that if you're interested, we can always let you know when they are, where you can get a more full training around person-centered thinking. And if you put your information in the chat box, I can make sure that when there are opportunities, you would have access to that as well. So one of the other things I wanted to talk about just a little bit is what we call a person-centered transition assessment. We have taken all of the person-centered thinking tools, the discovery tools and so on, and we have put them into an assessment. Now I did listen to Karen's presentation about assessments, and this is not a normed or validated type of assessment. This is more of an informal type of assessment of gathering discovery information. And what I always think about this as is it's a way of, we gather a lot of information about our students, and it provides a container, a place to put that information. And when you gather that information, then you have that container that you can use it to inform IEP planning, transition goals. You can use it to inform all the other planning that you're doing. So this is what we call a person-centered transition assessment. I've done quite a few of them. Some have involved the school personnel and some have been requested by a family. But the person-centered transition assessment, and I did include that in the large size handouts because I thought it would be hard to read. But it includes what we call a relationship map, and I am going to focus on that in just a few minutes. It includes the what others like and admire about the person. It includes the things that are important to them, the things that make them happy, satisfied, content, feel fulfilled. These are the things that help them stay healthy and safe down in the middle box. So these are the important for the student. Then we have a section that I call What Others Need to Know. And that's kind of a catch-all for things that we might learn about the student that doesn't really fit under important to or important for, but it's necessary information for everyone involved in their planning. One of the students, transition age students that I helped them do some planning, in this one, they wanted their school personnel to know all of the things that they had already been doing to plan for transition. The other agencies they were already working with for independent living skills, or the things that the classes, the camps that the student had taken, so that we weren't starting from scratch, that they knew that the family had an investment in it as well. And then, let's see, the second page of the transition assessment is characteristics of people who best support me. It's about getting a good match. When I talk about our quality of life can be good or bad based on a match. If you think about yourselves in your own lives, think about, have you ever spent time with, worked with somebody that you just click with? That from the get-go, it's just like things are really good. I really like being with this person. Time just kind of doesn't drag, it flies by. You think of all these creative things and possibilities together. You just enjoy the time too. And then we can probably all think about somebody that we know, have spent time with, that just rubs us the wrong way. And time drags when we're with that person. I feel like I don't have any creativity or any ideas of what to do because I just want the time to be over. We've all had those experiences too. And so there, you know, when we're in our school years and work life, we always don't get a chance to pick and choose the people that support us or work with us. But anytime there's an opportunity to get a good match, to be intentional about it, it's worth taking the time to try and get that match. We also talk about communication. We also talk about, for the transition planning, how does a person maybe who doesn't use words, how are they communicating and what are they trying to tell us? Sometimes students communicate more clearly with their behavior or their actions. So this communication chart helps us let others know what people are saying by what they do and how we should intervene. And then we end up identifying post-secondary goals. So these all should relate to the person's interests, their abilities that we've identified in the important twos. And then in our assessment, we develop a plan of action where we really identify what steps need to take place, who's the person responsible, and a timeline that holds, that we try to hold accountability. And when I'm doing this sort of planning where families involved, school personnel's involved, maybe Voc Rehab's involved or another agency, family support could be one, we talk about actions and who would be the person responsible for them. And then we get the commitment from that person that they will take that action item on, and they give us the date. Now, there are things that are in the school's realm, and I encourage school personnel to say that's something that we can do at school. That's something that we can do through their IEP or other planning. Family and the student take on some responsibility that kind of go outside of that and beyond. If a family support coordinator is involved, there are things that they can provide, things that they can, actions that they can take. And of course, VR can take some things on. So the action plan, and I was talking to a parent earlier today who said that piece for her when we did it for their family was incredible because, you know, a lot of things get talked about. We have the IEP, but there are also just some action steps that have to take place. And this kind of combines all of that in one place. Then the person walks away with, okay, this is my responsibility. Student walks away with, this is my responsibility. And hopefully that makes sense. But it's not, this type of assessment isn't like a fill in the blank. It is a process that really is about having conversations. And it's about knowing what you're listening for in those conversations and having a place or that container to put it. So I talk about, it's not an interview, it's not an interrogation. In fact, usually a student or their family will come in to do one of these planning meetings. And it's the first thing I'll say is, this isn't a test. There's no right or wrong answer. We're just going to have a conversation because I want to learn about the person. One thing that we have found out in persons using a person-centered approach and using these tools, it is very meaningful and lots of involvement of the student. And it's very meaningful and lots of involvement of the family. And the family members that have been involved have really liked the process because they feel very involved and they feel heard. And so it's been interesting too, because some students come in and not necessarily want to be there. But if I tell them it's not a test and I focus the question on them, my body language when I'm having those conversations with them, the question is to them. And everybody else has opportunity for input, but I really focus the information on the student. So it does require some practice and some facilitation skills. I say it's having meaningful conversations. You know that an interrogation or an interview, when things kind of just go in linear, what time do you get up? What do you do next? Those sorts of things, like it's a walk through time. Well, a branching conversation, I might start someplace and it goes all different directions. I might notice that the student is wearing a school jacket or a school shirt. So I might start a conversation there. Oh, tell me about that. Do you like sports? Are you involved with this team or that team or another team? Where it kind of branches off. But I know what I'm listening for. And what I'm listening for is, did I learn something that's important to the person? Did I learn something that's important, and where can I place that? Because all of those things might be clues to what they want to do in the future, what will help them be successful in the future as well. So it involves a lot of observing and noticing, and it asks questions to help us learn more about what we need to know. So using a lot of open-ended questions and digging a little bit deeper. Tell me more about. What is it about? You said you wanted to be I noticed that she used a policeman in the first one. And I wouldn't say, oh my gosh, that's not going to happen. Or I wouldn't be thinking that. I would think, well, tell me more about that. I want to hear about what your interest is in that. And I'll have to tell you a story about a young man that I was doing one of these informal assessments with and gathering information. And I was a half an hour late, and that never happens in my world. I just do not like to be late, but series of circumstances, some crossed wires, and I was a half an hour late. So I drove across town, got to the place where we had agreed to meet, and this whole table, this room is filled with about 5 people. VR counselor, the student, the parent who had taken time off from work, a teacher, and a family support coordinator. And of course, I apologized profusely and thought, oh. So the next day, we did gathered the information, and it took about an hour and a half to 2 hours. And the next day, I get an email. And I got an email from the parent. And she said, I just have to tell you that her son had said this was one of the best meetings he had had because he felt listened to, and I directed the questions to him. And that hadn't happened. And this kid is 18 years old. And so I know that there are so many demands placed on educators. And at transition, it seems like it's just so much more responsibilities that you have. But taking the time to do those things that focus right on that student and say, this is about you and your life. And I will often, mention to a parent that we're interested too, because we know that families are there once school life is over. And we end up with responsibilities too. And so I say, we have lots of, how do I want to say it? Opportunities. And I let parents know, but that also comes with responsibility to take on some of these things as well. But if we can share some of that, it is kind of like it takes a village, and here we're creating that village. So all of those things take practice, and it's about conversations. And in our world, we always use the mantra of guess, ask, and write. So if I've gathered information about what's important to and for a person, I would make a guess in my head about what that really means. And I would verify that with the person, and I would verify that with them before I wrote anything down. So this is what I heard you say. And I'm going to write this in. Is it okay if I write this down? And sometimes it feels like for students, we don't have any positive power and control in our own lives, or as families, we don't have that. But it helps give some of that personal power and control. No, you didn't hear me right, or can you write it a different way, or that's not what you heard. So it gives them that opportunity to have it reflected correctly. So I want to focus on this relationship map, and this is in one of the handouts, and it's also in your packet that has the PowerPoint slides. Because I'd like you to kind of, maybe make some notes on it, or maybe think about yourself. But it's a relationship map, and what it's meant to do is to give a snapshot of who's in this person's life. But when I'm starting a planning meeting with a family or a group, this is the place that I start. Because if we brought out the important to, important for handout, the one with the column that I had you write on, if we started with that, and if we said, what's important to you? We would get information, but we really wouldn't get the depth of information that would help us do some meaningful planning. We would get single answers, we would be filling in the blank, but we wouldn't get the other pieces of the information. So I always start with a relationship map, and let me tell you what's included in here. In the center would go the student's name, or if you were going to make one for yourself, it would go your name. Then there's 4 areas that we try and gather information about. If you look at the top quadrant of the circle, it's family. So we want to learn who's in the person's life that are family, or who they consider family. Now you'll notice that there are 2 concentric circles. So anybody that would go in this area closest to the person, that tells me that it's a close relationship. They're together a lot, they really like them. If they weren't in their life, someone would be missing. And then if they are out in this area, it might be a family member who they see once in a while, don't spend as much time with, but they still wanted to include them in their circle. So the closer you put someone's name to that center circle where their name is, that's a closer connection. So it's not about blood relationship in there that, well, you have a sibling. Well, I have 3 siblings. One of them is going to fit in the inner circle because I've got a really close connection. 2 of them, and don't tell them I said this, would go out here. Okay. So you get an idea. Okay, on the left-hand side over here, it says people who support me at school or work. So I would ask the student about who's in your life at school. Who do you feel really close to? Who do you connect with at school that supports you? And that would include teacher, if you have a case manager, a special ed person, regular ed teacher, a coach, a principal. I mean, it could include anybody. Maybe they are working part-time or have a job experience, and maybe they have a job coach. That would be where that person would go there. So they support the person at school or work. The closeness and the connection, again, is the same. It's based on where they want that person to be. If you go across, you find people who support me at home and other places. And so this would be, that's where I'd put, like, if there's a family support program coordinator that's involved and they want them on their circle. I might find out that they go to a peer group. I put that here. Maybe they're getting some services through independent living choices. Maybe they're getting some VR could be on the other side too. Maybe they have a companion that helps them get out and about. I would put them in that category. And then at the bottom is a friends category. And I would ask them about the friends, who they're close to, who their acquaintances are. And there's a dotted line down the middle of this. And the reason I do that is because on the one side, I put the students' friends. On the left side of the dotted line, I would put they have friends through their family. The reason we've done that is because sometimes it's hard to find, to really dig into and find out, do they have friends? Are they really their friends, or are they friends through a family because we always go camping together, or they're friends through my family at church? And it's a way of capturing that, to recognize that maybe that's where some time and energy needs to be put on developing some of those relationships. So this is where I start the conversation, is around that. I briefly, more briefly than I did to you, explain what it is. And then I ask them where they would like to start. So and I say, just point to where you'd like to start. Do you want to start with family, friends? And we start the conversation. So I want to show you an example of one that was completed. And this is based on a real person, a student, but the names have been changed to protect their information because it is personal. So this was a young lady, and she wanted to start with her family, and that's where we started the conversation with. So I'm going to ask you to do look at one other piece before I kind of get into this one. You should have this as a handout as well. And this is kind of you'll notice the headings in those boxes. There's important to, there's important for, there's who should we talk to, what others need to know, what is good support, and characteristics for a good match. This is kind of how I have the framework in my head. So when I'm having the conversation with Maisie, as I'm learning things, I'm writing down on that piece of paper where it would go. Because I'm going to learn through the conversation the things that she likes to do, that she's interested in. I'm going to learn the things that may be important for. I'm going to learn about characteristics of a good match. And let me give you an example. So I start the conversation with Maisie. She wants to talk about her family first. Well, tell me who's in your family. What do you like to do with your mom and dad? Are there things that you like to do together? Mom likes to go to concerts with her, listen to the same bands that she likes to listen to. And her dog isn't really her dog, but she does some of the chores for the dog. And then we find out that she's got some aunts in her life, but there is one that is particularly close to her that she likes to connect with. And when they come to visit, they just have fun together because she likes music, she likes to play video games, and so on. So as I'm finding as I'm having those conversations, I'm recording it here, but then I'm also have a scratch piece, that piece of paper with the boxes on it. And I'm putting that information down in those boxes. Now, when you're having a conversation, it's hard to, I usually say, I just get it on paper and then I can organize it later. But it's really, really helpful. So just from what I've described, would anybody be willing to unmute and just say, just from what I told you, did you learn about anything that she's interested in, what's important to her through just what I told you?
Video games.
Video games, yes. She likes to play video games.
Music.
She likes music and a concert. Yeah. And did you learn anything about any skills that she might have, or?
Maybe she's musical.
Yes, and she knows how to take care of the dog. You know, that sort of thing. So, you know, I know that she has some chores to do, some responsibilities. So then let's go over to the school part. And so when I ask her about, tell me some of the teachers that you have or some of the people that you really like, you can see that she has listed quite a few people. And on the outside, I list any groups that she has identified. So I find out, you know, why are these people in the middle, in that inner circle? I might find out, well, so-and-so is really funny and has a good sense of humor. Or somebody always notices me and notices and says hi to me. Has a good relationship with the case manager. And I'll find out, well, tell me more about that person. Because what I'm listening for are some characteristics about who makes a good match with her. What kind of people would provide her good support? So if she's looking for a job, needs a job coach, we might be able to make a good match. And then these people, the people in the outer circle, I find out about them as well. And then you see the groups or clubs that she's interested in. So you find more about her skills, abilities, and interests. What do you learn in this category, just from what I've said, that we didn't know from the top one? Anybody? Unmute and any ideas?
She still likes that music and gaming,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of spills over from home to school, maybe.
Yeah. And we also find out she's in art club. So that's an opportunity when I found out she's in that to say, tell me more about art. Are you an artist? What do you like to do? She does like art, but it ends up being more that she likes to write. And that writing is important to her. She likes to write stories, but it was all from this that I just kind of branched off into a conversation about, tell me more. What is it about the art club that you enjoy? And it morphed into, I like to write poetry, I like to write stories, and so on. And I'll show you an example filled in just a minute, but I would do the same over here and the same in this category. And so when I talk about friends with people, I ask them what they do together when they see each other. Does their friendship go beyond the school day? Do they stay connected beyond the school day? Are there, what do they do when they're together? What do they talk about? Because I'm going to find that information. So let me show you, this was the format. As I'm having the conversation, I've got a relationship map and I've got this container, because as I'm gathering information, I'm putting it into this. And this is completed. Let's see if I can see the whole thing myself. Oops, there it is. So what I found out, okay. What I found out through all the conversations, and all of this came from the conversation around the relationship map. You can see what's important to her that we got to, because I found out when I asked about her friendships, if you look down in that list of bullets right here, she likes to have her look and be stylish. We found out what's important for her is having a schedule. She likes a consistent routine. but we found out that it's really important for how the day goes, that she has a schedule and she knows it. We also found out that while she likes styles and fashion, we also found out that she needs some help dressing appropriately for different occasions. She hasn't quite got that skill down. And learning some boundaries and identifying situations that might be dangerous or unsafe. We found out, you know, one of the things I say with person-centered planning is to think about, is there anybody else's input that we should get? Should we include anybody in the meeting, or should we at least include their information? And who should we talk to? And we found out that her friend Maya, who is close in the circle, maybe we should ask Maya, talk to her to get some information about what people like and admire and appreciate about Maisie. Some of the teachers, not just special educators, but also from a regular education class. Maybe her aunt would have some input. Maybe her therapist would have some input. So I always say one person can start the planning, but input should include more to get that depth of information. And by asking about who the people were in her life that she really liked and why they made her middle circle, I found out their characteristics are that they need to be kind, because she does not like if she thinks somebody's been mistreated or talked to in a mean way. They need to be honest, a good sense of humor, a good listener. They need to be flexible and yet hold her accountable. And then you can see the important twos. From that, I also about some supports that she would need. When we talk about how important her routine is to her, we know that a support is, if her schedule changes, let her know as soon as possible. Try not to spring it on her. We know a good support is to coach her on the appropriateness of an outfit. And the best time to do that is not when she's already gotten dressed for the day or comes for something. Let's say that she's going to an event hosted by the art club, and they're supposed to dress a certain way, be there at a certain time. The time to coach her on that would be, if you know ahead of time when it is, kind of coach her on what's appropriate and what's acceptable, whether it's dress, whether it's when to arrive, and what's going to happen there. And that would help her immensely. So do you have any questions from what you see up here? And I'm going to, let's see, stop share for a minute. And does anybody have any questions so far? Don't be shy. Person-centered planning is really strengths-based. Focusing on a person's positive qualities, the things that they can do. Now, it doesn't mean we overlook or bypass things that they struggle with, but instead of thinking that's something they need to stop or something that we hope would be different, we talk about it and how are we going to support them through it. Making sense so far? Thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways. Give me some indication. Okay, feedback. And like I said, when I do one of those assessments, I try and never go beyond 2 hours. Now, that's oh my gosh, that takes a lot of time. But what I always say is you're going to spend time someplace. And these things don't have to be done or completed. You know, like you work with students, you learn about them every single day. You learn what they're interested in. You learn what they're good at. You learn where they need support. And you can capture that information in that kind of worksheet that I have that says important to, and so on. You can be gathering that information over time. Doesn't have to be in one setting. But it's information that helps them not just identify what they want to do or be when school is over, or how they want to live, but it helps us identify sometimes that information that helps them be successful. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Is there? Anything else? Okay. So we've got a half an hour and I want to get through a couple of other things. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, and I just want to mention something else about the relationship map and why I start there and why I like it. Oops. Okay, let's see, previous.
Brenda, this is Dan.
Yes.
The neat thing about this too is that it seems like it's something that can be ongoing and continually developed and worked on. So it's not a one-time shot.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's where I think, don't feel the pressure to, but I just know that as teachers, you learn so much about who they are and about what they like and where the supports are. To not capture that seems like, to capture that to me values the relationship that you have. And then that information can be moved on or shared with other people who are coming into their life or other teachers that are going to have them. It's very helpful so that they can see who the person is, not a label that they might have. So one other thing about the relationship map, and then I'll get off of that, but I've been working lately, it just seems like it ended up this way, with some young people who are out of school services, or maybe didn't even have school services, but they're not launching into life. They're struggling. They're ending up at home, kind of in the basement. And I'm talking in general, of course, but, and what it goes back to is we need people and we need relationships in our lives. They can connect us to other things. They can support us in different ways. And so we need to maintain relationships. And what I've been finding with a lot of these young people is that they've told me they had some relationships when they were in school, but those relationships didn't go beyond the school day. And once school life ended, those relationships have not been maintained. Some people go on to college, some people get married, and so on, and the relationship. And so I bring that up just to say it's worthwhile to at least spend some time in discussion, talking about, do they need support to maintain them? And is there something that is helpful at school? Is there something that would be helpful from at home so that a parent would know, what can I do? Because it's one thing I hear over and over and over again is the lack of people in a student's life or in that person's life. So anyway. Uh-oh. Now I'm going to have a little problem, I think, Dan, because I clicked and my cursor wants to just spin. So I have two options. I can close out and come back in, or I can talk from the handouts.
Jenny, do you have her PowerPoint? Is it a PowerPoint that?
Yes.
Well, I tell you what, if you could put up the handout one, at least
Yes.
I could go from there.
I can do that.
Okay.
Okay, let me pull it up.
I apologize about that. I was hoping that would not happen.
You did at one point say that your connection was low, so.
Right, and I made everybody in the household turn everything on. Okay, so One of the other discovery tools that I just wanted to talk about a little bit is on page, I think, on slide number 29. It's called Good Day, Bad Day. And so, and actually, this one really helps us identify. So it's not, when I said earlier, it's not about saying what's important to you so we can write a list. It's using these discoveries tools to have different conversations that help us gather that information. So, yep,
Keep going down.
yep. Okay, right there. So it helps us have that. And good day, bad day is a great way to have a conversation, because it's like, what helps that student have a good day at school, on the weekends, and what contributes to them having a bad day. And we can start generating those things. So I think it's on the next page. When we do a good day, bad day, you can go to the next page.
I think that's all I have.
Okay, I bet that's in the other thing. Okay, it should be on your handouts there, but the things that you want to consider, and these are things I start a conversation about. Tell me about a good day. What's a good day at school? Is there, who do you see? Who do you spend time with? What classes are you going to when there's a good day? When you're at home, what are you doing on one of those good days? So are there routines that you have, that you get to have, that you really enjoy on that good day? And I just start generating what people tell me on that side, what a good day is. And then I look at a person's worst day or a bad day. What happened that made it a bad day? Okay, there we go. It's on the top slide on the screen. And you can look at that and say, think about your worst day. What's happening on that day? When everything seemed to be, what's happening when everything seems to be going wrong? Is there anything that we can learn from that kind of a day? Is there anything missing in your life when the day is not good too? So what I want you to do is just take a couple of minutes and either on a piece of paper or on those notes, write a few things that are part of your good day. Who's there? Think about a good day at work or at school for you. Who's present? What's happening? What's taking place? What are you experiencing on that day that's really a good day at work? And then I want you to list a few things on one of your bad days. What's happening then? Who isn't there? Who is there? Those sorts of things. And I won't ask you to share all that, but. And think about those things that I asked you to consider as you're writing those. Get a few things there. So once I've gathered that information, I kind of step back from it and look at it and look for any themes. I look for, are there certain classes that the student likes? Are there certain people they get to see or interact with? And then I ask questions around that, because I can identify people who are good supporters, what their characteristics are. I learn more about what's important to them, their interests, their likes, their preferences, and their abilities. And then I look at the bad day and I look for any themes that are there. Because as we plan forward, it will give us clues as far as what's important to them. And good day, bad day helps us identify what good support is. because we can't always change the bad day or make it go away or different, because bad days happen. They happen to all of us. What I'm looking for here are ways when that bad day happens, are there any strategies we can use to support them so that they can get through it? So that it can maybe shift the bad day into a little better day, so that we can, even avoid as much as possible the bad day from happening. And it's just using everyday language and a simple framework to do that. But having the definitions of important to, important for, and support help. And I'll give you a couple of examples. And from that one I gave you before, when I showed you that I had collected the good day, bad day, the support pieces, we knew with Maisie how important a routine is. It kept surfacing everywhere. Her good day is when that schedule is followed, that it's a consistent schedule, that there's no changes or surprises in it. A bad day is when it didn't go according to plan and she didn't have some of those supports. Or she didn't know about it. It kind of came up on her. She wasn't prepared. Well, those things happen. A kid could wake up in the morning and all of a sudden find there isn't school today because of a snowstorm. Or, talk about in COVID, there's going to be lots of adaptability asked for or required for everybody to get through it. But so then we think about what supports, what helps. It's to let other people know that, you know what, give her a heads up as soon as you know that schedule's going to change or something's going to be different in the day. And if a schedule changes for her, she needs reassurance that it's a temporary change. It'll go back to the way it was when. And that seems to help her get through without having bigger issues. So the supports, I always tell people to write them in a way that somebody would know what to do or say. So that if Dan and Janelle shared the student, that you both would know what supports help her to be successful and help her get through when things aren't going well. So, okay, let's go down to the next one. So, and I would encourage you to use that format to practice on yourself or practice with somebody so that you can get an idea of what am I looking for in that list and how can that help me plan, what clues can I get from that so that we do get a meaningful, achievable post-secondary, those post-secondary goals in education, in employment, and in independent living. Gathering all this sort of discovery information can really help as you develop goals, look at the course of study. All of the things that you're required to do in transition. And I think a bonus of the person-centered approach is the relationships that you can develop with the family members. It involves families' participation. It involves the student participation. We want students to develop self-determination. And when they're really involved, identifying, giving some approval or disapproval of what goes in some of that or what they want to work on, helps start develop those skills. They feel an ownership in it. From a family member's perspective, they want to be heard. And by asking this sort of information, we have found that families really like a person-centered planning approach and that they get very vested in it because they see where it's going to talk about aspects of their life that'll help them be successful. Not just determine, where they're going to go or whether it be school or whether it be to a service agency. They want think about their family member having a good life. And they're contributing to helping them define what that good life is.
Hey, Brenda,
Right? Yes.
I need to just interrupt you for a second so I can throw a code word out for everybody.
Sure.
It's very fitting to what you're talking about. The code word is discovery. Discovery. And please write that down so you have it, and we'll put it in the chat box. But discovery is a very important key word to this whole process, and I think it's very fitting. So discovery.
Yeah. And you know, you may think you know students well, but approach these things as you're really trying to, you know, that you're really trying to uncover and learn new things. I've sat around tables many times where somebody says, I've worked with them for 4 years and I did not know that that was an interest or that was an ability they had. And it's not because you haven't been trying. It's just that in that whole process, different things have been learned, that there was an opportunity or a space for that to kind of surface. I did list some resources on the last page of your handouts, where there's YouTube videos about person-centered thinking skills and tools. I have additional information if you're interested, and I love to share those things. My email address is there as well. There was something else that I wanted to, and I just want to speak about the session that I plan to do tomorrow. Today I focused on the person-centered thinking skills and tools, and they all are under that person-centered approaches umbrella. Tomorrow, what I'm going to focus on doing is how do we plan using what we call charting the life course. And they have, in charting the life course, there are additional skills and tools that help a student develop a vision for their life and identify the supports that they might have available to them to help them achieve that. And also uses those tools to discover what's really important to that student. What do they value? What do they want their life to be? And that's what we're trying to figure out through all of this discovery. So I'm going to pause there, but I do want to get some of your thoughts and ideas. If we could go to the gallery view. Do you want to stop sharing the screen for me? Yeah. And let me see if I could just get some feedback on any takeaways from today. Any questions you have that I still need to give you some more explanation? Or does it seem like I could incorporate some of these? And I always say, don't try everything at once. Try one thing. Have a good day, bad day conversation. Or when you're talking with a student, just be thinking of, did I learn anything more about what's important to them that can help us in that planning? So feedback, takeaway. Don't everybody jump in at once.
I think I'd just like to add too, Brenda, that this is real consistent with what our VR counselors are learning across the state right now, as far as they're working on this. There's training that's being implemented on customized employment, which is, they're actually paying our providers extra money to provide that upfront discovery process. So it falls into place. So the more work we can get done with students while they're in high school and preparing for this particular point, so the VR counselor can pick it up and know how can we work with this student, and where are we at with this. So very
well,
helpful.
and that's a good point, because I've been doing training with vocational rehabilitation services for the last few years on person-centered. So if somebody says, I found out, send something that you've discovered what's important to the person with them for the VR counselor, they will recognize that language and be able to use that information to help inform their planning and their work. Whenever I start a meeting or end a meeting, I usually, any meeting with a student present and a family present, I just started doing, you know, thanking everybody for their participation. But before we leave, I ask people to go around the table and tell us something that you like, admire, or appreciate about the student. And so we start building a list of their positive strengths and qualities. And you'll notice on that one top page, it says what I like and admire and appreciate about the person, or what others do. And that's where I gather that. For a student to sit in that seat and hear somebody, a teacher, a VR counselor, tell them, I really admire how you stick to it, the perseverance you have, or how kind you are, or how thoughtful you are and helpful you are to others, how funny you are, because you've got such a good sense of humor. You see that student sit up just a little bit taller and is much more willing to be engaged. You see the family member sit up a little straighter and taller, because it's like, you notice that about my child. I just appreciate you noticing those positive qualities about my child. And then when I write a plan, that's the first thing that I put in the plan, is what others like and admire and appreciate about them. Because when we focus on somebody's positive qualities and characteristics, it opens us up to thinking about new opportunities, connections, and possibilities for them. And always, you know, I always try and keep in mind that the things that the person struggles with or that they have trouble with, how can we think of that in terms of how do we support them through it? How do we support them so that it doesn't go that way, or they don't have to do it that way? And think in terms of support. And like I said, the relationships that, if I know that you've noticed those positive qualities about my son or daughter, I can talk about some of the harder conversations. You can bring up some of the other things then. Do you know, does that make sense?
Here, we had a question in the chat box, Brenda.
Okay.
Yeah. Would you suggest waiting until transition age to do the good day, bad day? Or how soon, age-wise, would you consider starting this with a student?
Anytime. If I'm going to use it for transition purposes, you know, to help inform, yes. But to just use it in general, if you're getting a new student and you're meeting the family or something for a first time, tell me about what helps them have a good day at school. Oh, hey, I'm right there. I'm going to tell you. And tell me what might contribute to a bad day. And it's very helpful for you in gathering a lot of information about what needs to be present or not present, and what kind of support the person needs. When I do training for families, I teach them this tool, but I say, this is to help you have conversations. If I'm a parent going to school and I'm meeting a new teacher, I will tell you, here's what helps him have a good day. Here's where he can do his best. And if these things happen, it might be not a good day, but we've learned some strategies at home that work. And it can give you a jump start into knowing that person and helping them be successful.
And I was going to say, you could always, you know, start it early and then always update it every time you meet, and keep using it and updating it. And then when they do reach transition age, it'll be there updated for you to use while writing that plan.
So, yep. And there's another question, I think.
Yep.
Yes. You can, some of these, by knowing those things, you can prevent some actions or behaviors that you don't want to happen. And there are other tools like the communication chart that can help with that. How do we respond? How do we intervene when the person's having a bad day? That can help kind of shift things a little bit, that can prevent some of those blow-ups. from happening.
Brenda,
I
there's
also,
another question in here in regard to, do you ever see a difference in answers or input if you conduct these interviews with the parents and students in a separated room or at a different time?
really haven't interviewed with, we've usually always done it with a student and a parent, at least present. But what I do is, because sometimes the student will say something and the parent will interject like, oh, I've never heard that, or, that's not what I think. And what I always do is I always ask the person, and then what I usually do is I'll say, I'm going to ask your mom the question, is it okay? Oh yeah, it's okay. And then I might get their perspective and I record those separately. I have I might draw a line down from what's important to, and on one side I put what's important to the student, what's important to the parent. And when I record that, the parent knows that they were heard. And as a parent myself, it was important to me that I was heard because I provided support to this kid for 20 hours every day. And so I wanted to make sure I was heard. And parents can become your real allies to help the student achieve those outcomes that we work so hard to teach them and do as well. But I always find it's important to record both. You don't want to change the students if they told you something that's different. And anybody that's been a child or has an adult child or a teenage child, we know they don't always agree. They have different ideas for their life and their future, and they should be captured.